Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, I thought today's episode would be a continuation, of course, of the scenic treatments for the disused viaduct, but another video series has jumped the queue in order for a club meeting I'm holding this Friday. So in today's episode, we are taking a look at the beginning of constructing a signal box. Now, this is scratch built, laser cut and brick texture wrap. So this is in aid of the club meeting I'm hosting this Friday. Now, I belong to the local Christchurch Model Railway Club, and unlike some other clubs, we don't actually have a club layout or club rooms. So each month, one of the members hosts a meeting in their own house where they go through and demonstrate something maybe that they've been modelling or some particular type of modelling technique. So, of course, this Friday, it's my turn to host this meeting. Now, one of the things the club members have been keen to know more about, of course, is my laser cutter and the ability to laser cut model kits. In other words, essentially scratch built models of buildings and so forth. So it's been on the cards for quite a while, this particular project. I first started investigating doing a laser cut scratch built signal box this time last year. So I look back at files and I'd begun work on it in June last year. So the initial process, of course, was doing some research into signal boxes and working out the style of signal box that I'd like to construct. So, of course, that meant doing a lot of Google search and finding out what kind of signal box that I'd like to work on. Now, the signal box that I came across was one that's in North Yorkshire, and it's called the Bedale Signal Box. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and it's unique in the sense that it is full brick construction. I know that there are quite a number of signal boxes around the UK countryside, of course, that have a brick base, or the ground floor is brick, and of course the upper floor where the lever frames and everything are is of timber construction. But I really wanted to look at a signal box where it's brick throughout, including the upper floor. So the Bedale signal box is quite unique in that sense, and it's quite a picturesque type of signal box, and it is quite small as well. So in the process of actually developing a design for this, of course, I did modify it. I wanted to make it slightly larger and add in an additional set of windows and make it slightly longer. So this is really part one of possibly a 2 or 3 part series where we look at actually assembling this signal box, how I went about actually designing it up a little bit on the computer, but more so about actually the process I use when it comes to assembling the components and also wrapping this brick texture. So I think without further ado, let's just get into what I got up to in the first stage. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go through the entire build process, but what I do want to show you is just some of the key processes or procedures that I use when it comes to constructing these card scratch built kits that I make. So as you can see here, we've got 2 containers and they're pretty much full of all the components. Some items are pre-assembled, and it's now a case of starting to actually assemble some of the structure. So where to begin? And I think what we're actually going to do is work on this upper section where we're just going to cover this in brickwork. Now, this is more of a simple process in the sense that all I'm doing is just literally applying the brickwork. Now over here we've got our sheet of printed walls. So for example, this section here is this one here, and what I've actually done is printed the excess just on two edges. So the idea is that I'm going to lay up this brickwork on this section of wall and butt it up to the top and left hand corner, and then of course trim all the excess around the other two edges. So that's for the upper section, obviously. So this is our upper wall section. So we've got 4 walls here. We can set that aside because we don't need that. That is a floor. So what we're going to do is we're just going to trim out these textures that we need, and I did label these. So we've got lower front wrap, lower rear, upper front. We'll start with this. So this is the rear wall, and we're going to trim off this edge here. So as I mentioned, this is actually going to be butted up into that top corner, and you'll just notice possibly in here you can see the top of window arches and nothing else. So by my calculations on the computer, when I lay this down, those arches should map exactly where these window apertures are. So it's a case of peeling this off and sticking this on, and then of course trimming the excess. And I might turn it up the other way so that I can get this lined up. So the method that I use here, now the sticky label paper is actually a bit annoying to separate sometimes. That was okay. What I would do is I don't actually peel it all back. So I'm just peeling back a small section, and it means that I can hold this down on the card. Now the interesting thing is, when I started designing this and setting it up in the computer, I actually realized the signal box, regardless of the prototype, the Bedale signal box, this is of course I've made slightly larger and longer, it's still actually quite a small signal box. It's not a very large signal box, so it's quite interesting. And because of that, this is quite an intricate and fiddly model, unlike some of the other buildings that I have kit bashed or designed. For example, the upper level station, and then there's also the curved warehouse. In comparison, they're considerably larger structures than this tiny little wee signal box. So as you can see, what I just did then, as I peeled it back as I went and flattened it down. Now another thing to mention too is this printed texture label paper has had a matte clear spray varnish applied over it. So it's not just the bare print, because it just gives it that little bit of extra protection for when you're pressing it down, you're not going to scratch the print or anything like that. So with that now laid down, now we're basically going to trim off the excess. So, you know, we're starting to actually get the shape here. So what I'll do is I'll carry on, trim this out, and of course I will do these other walls here and then come back to you at the end once I've done that, because the next step then is we're going to start wrapping this brick texture inside the window apertures. Right, so I've finished applying the brick texture to these upper wall sections, and I've just trimmed around the outside. So as you can see, we still have our window cavities to sort out. So the process I use, of course, this is just a complete full brick finish here, and turning it upside down, it's just a case of running a knife along the top and bottom edges, and I probably don't need a huge amount, so I'm going to split it through about there, and making sure we don't go too far over that edge, so we'll split it say about there. So we sort of end up with that cut out through that section, and then it's just a case of pushing it through and giving it a reasonably good crisp edge on it. And I might just use our popsicle stick for this, just to give it that nice hard edge. And then that's now wrapped around the edges. Now I've designed these so that we've actually got a windowsill inserted in here, and I should have actually trimmed that out first. I might have to sort this one out later. Because I should have actually factored that in. So I'll sort out that windowsill later, because as you can see on this one here, you can see that there's these notches at the edges. Now that's actually where windowsills are actually going to slot in. So what I actually should have done is cut the lower edge and the upper edge, but also actually cut in so that we don't end up with that windowsill notch getting filled up with paper texture. So what I've actually done, you see, is actually cut out that top and bottom section where the notches are, because clearly I need that space for the windowsills. And this is the method I actually used when I was doing the curved warehouse many years ago, and I kind of like the effect that it gives rather than just sticking a card windowsill on top of the brickwork, because it means that the windowsill actually recesses in to the wall and then butts up against the window frame. So that's what we sort of end up with. So I'll carry on and do the rest of these. That's the square ones. Actually, I'll just demonstrate one of these arch windows. So the arch window, what we can actually do is split it down the middle. So just run a cut down the middle, cut across the bottom, factor in the windowsill. I mean, the interesting thing is this is just so much smaller than what I've ever really sort of put together, so this is actually exceedingly fiddly. Not that I'd want to put any of you guys off from trying something out like this, but And just to think, this is 00 scale, and of course I regularly watch Chanwell, and he does all this kind of stuff in N scale, and he doesn't even have a laser cutter. So he does all of this by hand, which just blows me away. So I would honestly say that a laser cutter for Chanwell would be a game changer, but he seems to be quite happy doing his hand cutting. So we're now actually running a knife just where the vertical turns into the arch, and then we've got to just sort of cut that top section into like little kind of like pie pieces, little wedges, and this is just so small. This is crazy stupid idea. Why did I decide to do this? So we can now press that one in, and press the other side in, press that over, push that over, and what do I need? Probably actually something round. So we've got ourselves a paintbrush here, so we're just pressing this top of this arch in with the handle of this paintbrush, which of course is, the idea is to give us a nice crisp edge on it. And then we have these tiny little pieces poking through, and we're just going to press those out with our popsicle stick. So that's the result we end up with. So you of course end up with your brick edge and the wrap around on the arch, and then looking at the other side, it looks pretty rough, but it doesn't matter. So that's working a arched window. So as I said, I will carry on and do the rest of these and come back to you when this is complete. Right, so I finished wrapping this upper level, the wall sections. So we've got the nice brick edge wrapping round on the window apertures. So we've got some windows here to add in, and we've also got a door here to place into this section here, and then we've got these little wee small arch windows as well. So we'll get onto those in a minute. What I'd like to do is I've made up these sections here. Now these are the corner columns on the upper level, so they're just two sections glued together in a corner frame, and these ones here are probably going to be a little bit tricky because basically I need to wrap these with the brick texture around the corner and around the edge and back on itself in the inside. So the idea is when we have our corners notched together here, so I'll just see if I can demonstrate that. So we'll have that corner like that, then this piece here is then going to fix over the top to create that corner column, and then of course this is wrapped in brickwork. So we're just going to give one of these a go and see how it goes. So I've made up, obviously printed out small sections of brickwork to do this wrap. So I really just don't know how well this is going to work, so let's just try it out. Because the last thing I want to do is actually break these corner pieces. Now these are just glued together with rocket card glue, so in theory, I say, it should be reasonably strong. And we're just going to position this in here, so we reckon about here. I'm kind of winging it as far as the positioning goes. So as you can see, I've had the print upside down on the table and I'm placing this column L frame on top of it rather than trying to do it the other way around. And then we've got to kind of wrap this around the edge. Now what I might do is we'll use our L bracket just to pop that in there so as we don't end up breaking this. And maybe if we get a ruler underneath here. So I'm using this L bracket, sorry, the square, I should say, engineer's square, to wrap this around the edge of this. And I've just got to be so careful. I just really do not want this to come apart. But at the same time, it'd be nice to get a reasonably crisp edge on this. So just press that down. Press that down. And then we've got to trim off the excess on the top, and I might actually use this one. Actually, we'll do this side first. I apologise if my hand is blocking the camera. There's no real easy way of dealing with this. And then we've got to get this to wrap around the edge. Fortunately, you only have to see me do one of these. I've got 4 of them to make. Right, well, that did work, but I tell you what, it certainly wasn't easy. Right, so there's our little corner piece, and with the brickwork wrapped around the edge. So it's pretty crazy, but we do these things. So I've just got another 3 of these to apply with the brickwork. So I'll do those remaining corner columns off camera. Let's take a look at some windows and doors. So we'll actually look at this one here, because this one here is actually quite complicated, because as you can see, I've got 2 shapes here. They actually interlock with each other because there really isn't much. There's literally no brickwork between the door and the window. It's obviously just a wooden frame in the prototype, so we're just literally going to pop the door in here and then slot the window frame in next to it. So I'm just hoping this is going to work. So a couple of different combinations here. We've got the rocket card glue for card based stuff, and then there's the glue and glaze, which is this one here, which of course I'll use for the window sections. So I'll start with the door. I kind of feel like the door needs to, or at least it might be an easier process if the door went in first. So that's the door positioned in place, and this is all going to get a matte varnish once it's all assembled, so that will get rid of that glossy glue there. But the door is actually cut from 0.6mm black card. It's got printed label paper on top, and then it's cut through and then also engraved to get those door panels. Right, now the theory is that this should fit in here and in the right position. Right, so that's the window in there now. So there's going to be a frame, a wooden frame around that door. So the theory is that's going to hide where the join is. Right, so that's that one glued on. What we'll look at is we'll attach these in here. So that's our two arch windows. So this is the rear wall of the upper floor. So that's how these windows are attached. So I'll carry on and do the rest of these windows as just these two to do, and then come back to you with the next phase. So I've now attached all the windows to the inside of the upper wall units, and they sort of have come out reasonably well. If I can get that to focus. So it's starting to take shape. So what I'm actually going to move on with now is actually assembling the roof component. So I'm actually having rafters on the inside, not that you'll be able to see them, possibly on a very unusual angle. So we're going to pop the rafters in, and I'm actually going to assemble the roof as its own separate structure that we can then anchor down, because we do have these edge components on these rafters, of course, which will theoretically line up with the wall components for here. So we'll just attach these. So that's now the roof component set up, and as you can see there's a bit of a gap down there, but that's not critical, and we've got our rafters in there. So the theory is that these wall sections will slot in around either side of these rafter sections. So another component now to add before we actually assemble this top half is adding in these interior decorations. So these are just simply printed label that's going to be applied to the inside, and it's just sort of going to tidy up the inside, because I do want to have detail where you can look in and see various things going on inside. So we'll stick these on, and this might be quite tricky. So these parts here, I printed it as one entire graphic, and before I actually did anything with these wall sections, I actually placed them on top and actually cut out where the window sections are, so that it was sort of ready to go. I didn't have to worry about applying or cutting these apertures afterwards. So we're just going to stick that onto there. So that's what the interior wall is going to look like, and the exterior. So I'll carry on and do the rest of these interior prints and come back to you when that's complete. Right, so that's all the interior walls now decorated. So what I'm actually going to do is assemble this, and then we can actually attach the roof. Right, so that's the upstairs outer walls assembled, but one item that's going in the interior is a fireplace. So this is going to be positioned in here to line up with the chimney. So sure how you'll be able to see that, but there's our fireplace positioned in there. So the theory is this should slot in, and these rafters button right at the end, and it should squeeze down over the top of these. So that's how it's looking with the roof on, and as you can see in there, you can see where the rafters droop down or dip down at the ends. I've got little features there, and of course the wall slots into that point there, which will give it the rigidity that it needs in there. And the theory is that with this hole in the roof, and of course the reason for the notch in the back wall there, is that this chimney stack should slot into there. Whoops. There's our chimney stack in there, and then of course on the outer wall at the back there is this component here, which of course is the chimney breast, which is kind of low relief on the back wall here. So I'm just putting the last of these corner columns on, so you can see there we've now got these cordon components, of course, now which actually hide that seam like so. That's what it originally looked like, and that's what it looks like with it on. So I've just got this last one to put on, so we'll attach that. So that's with the corners now attached, and we're now going to add in the wee sort of architrave pieces that sit up in here, and they're actually stepped like in the form of the brickwork. And these components here, what I actually did is I just applied a bit of printed brick paper to a sheet of card and then laser cut this out. So I wasn't prepared to go about trying to wrap this serrated edge of the brickwork, so it is just simply applied to the card beforehand and then laser cut afterwards. So we'll just glue these in. So that's how the stepped brickwork looks up on this top piece. Of course, I've still got a board to run along the edge here. I haven't actually made that yet, but that'll be one of the last things I do. So we'll apply the stepped brick to the other end. So that's the stepped brick at the other end. So it's starting to come together, and yeah, it's very fiddly and quite complex in a lot of ways. So that's mostly the first stage complete, and of course that's all focused on the upper part of the signal box. There's still yet to be a few things to add. I haven't actually installed the window sills, and as you can see, I've actually done a printed slate tile texture for the roof. Now the plan there, of course, is I am actually going to lay up individual tiles, or at least strips of tiles which are laser cut. So as I mentioned, of course, I'm a member of the local Christchurch Model Railway Club, and of course described our club is structured. Now, if there's anyone here locally within Christchurch, New Zealand, who maybe is interested to know more about the club that I belong to, please feel free to leave a comment in the description below, or even actually click through to my Facebook page and send me a private message if at all you're sort of interested in knowing more about the Christchurch Model Railway Club. So I'll leave it there for today's episode. I certainly hope you've gathered some inspiration and ideas for your own layouts, and of course in particular constructing scratch built buildings. So do take care, everyone. Look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.